Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the Alumni Reel panel discussion. I really wish we were on campus, but hopefully next year we'll be able to do it in person. It is wonderful to be able to have this event again and to have resumed the Alumni Reel. So thank you all for participating. Thank you for coming tonight. There are thousands of colleges and universities in the United States. Only one is entirely unconstrained by the assumptions of the past. Only one has as its goal to invent the future of the liberal arts. Only one has as its mission the transformation of all the others. That's what we aspire to do. When I look 5, 10, 50 years into the future of Hampshire, here's what I see. A college where the essential questions of the present and the future shape the curricular experience. A college that leads the way in generating ideas and inspiration to make the world a better place. A college with the entrepreneurial energy and artistic creativity to motivate change that moves from vision to action, from idea to art. A college that lives the principle that the arts and the humanities do not merely illuminate the issues we face, but are essential to solving the challenges of our age. A college where students' work span radically across discipline, crafts, and fields to make progress in the most bedeviling of our local and global problems. A college whose faculty are energized to collaborate, mentor, explore, and learn as partners and colleagues with their students. A college that the world looks to for solutions, for new ideas, for groundbreaking works of art and innovation. Tonight, we celebrate the filmmaking of our alums. Filmmaking is a way to make sense of the world, a way to contemplate challenges, tell stories, bring people together to ask questions, to complicate perception and provoke people to see things they couldn't before. Hampshire has been leading the way in filmmaking for 50 years, and tonight we celebrate those accomplishments while looking forward to the next 50 years. Davis, I turn it over to you for the land acknowledgement.
Thanks, Ed. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us here today. We want to begin by naming that we are unceded on unceded Pecumtuck land. We understand that naming this is not enough. We're doing this as a way of acknowledging and reminding ourselves about the land we occupy. And we know this act alone does not repair the damage done by the past and by colonialism. We want to acknowledge the Pecumtuck people, the original inhabitants of the land where we live and work, and the land that Hampshire College is on. This land spans from what is currently known as Hampden and Hampshire counties into Connecticut and southern Vermont. And while there are still individuals with Pecumtuck ancestry here, the Pecumtuck people as a tribe are no longer in residence because of the ongoing violence at the hands of European colonization. We'd also like to acknowledge the neighboring indigenous nations, the Nipmuc and the Wampanoag to the east, the Mohegan and Pequot to the south, the Mohican and Nonotuck to the west, and the Abenaki to the north. To learn more about this history, I want to encourage you to read Dr. Lisa Brooks' new book called Our Beloved Kin, A New History of King Philip's War, which sheds light on the powerful and complex history of Native resistance in the area. I actually just started reading it a couple of weeks ago. It's great, and the title's in the chat if you want to write it down. We know that there are people on this webinar who are joining us from around the US and throughout the world. And we want to encourage you to learn about the original peoples of the land that you were settled on. A resource that can help you with this is the Native Land App, an Indigenous land-led organization. We'll be putting a link to that in the chat as well. Before we close, I want to leave us all with a couple questions to reflect on. What can we do individually and collectively to repair the harm done by settler colonialism? And how can we build a right relationship with this land we have settled on?
with that, I'm going to turn it over to Trustee Elle Chan, Fall 87 alum and chair of the 50th Anniversary Committee. She is tonight's moderator, and she will introduce our panelists. Elle?
Thanks, Karen. I want to say hello. She just told you all who I am if you didn't know me already. And I did want to welcome and ask you all to turn on your cameras, our panelists and our wonderful filmmakers that are joining us to talk tonight. Erica Huggins, Sarah Goldfinger, and Arpita Kumar, if you can join on camera. Hello. And I also did want to thank the team of everyone that put together the reel, and hopefully a lot of you had a chance to take a look at it over the course of this week, and it is available on the YouTube channel, I think, so people can link to it and have a look. I wanted to start us off tonight. Brunner put together a clip from each one of our filmmaker participants, and we're going to look at that little clip today, and then we'll start our discussion with all the filmmakers. Fantastic. Thank you, Brunner, for putting those clips together. And as you can see, we have a really broad diversity of work from each one of the filmmakers and writers that are joining us tonight. If we can go and have each one of you introduce yourselves, that'll give everyone an opportunity to hear from you, and also talk about what you're doing now in the industry and how you carved your path. Maybe we can start with Sarah. Sarah has been a showrunner for the Emmy award-winning Netflix series, actually dramedy Trinkets. I think that was what we just saw that clip from. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that and what you've been doing. Welcome.
Sure, thank you. So I graduated from Hampshire in '98, and I came out to LA right away, and I was a nanny for a year and a half while I tried to figure things out. And then I became a writer's assistant, and I was very lucky that I became a writer's assistant on what became a hit TV show, which was CSI. And so I was basically able to ride a decade of my career on CSI, which was phenomenal. And I, went in as an assistant and came out as an upper level producer and learned all kinds of things on that show. And then I moved around. I did Brothers and Sisters and Parenthood and Hawaii Five-0 and Grimm and a bunch of different shows. And I did Jane the Virgin. And then, so the most recent is Jane the Virgin, the Charmed reboot, and Trinkets. And Trinkets was my first Netflix show. So that was an interesting, all my other work had mostly been network. Do you want more? Do you want more detail?
Let's introduce the other two, and then we can actually dive in deeper. So Erica, can you turn your camera on? Erica is the president of, Seth MacFarlane's.
Hi, hi, Erica Huggins. The company's called Fuzzy Door, and I've been with Seth. I'm his partner. I've been there for a little over 2 years. I started out in the business as a film editor, an apprentice editor, rose up through the editing world to become an editor, and then was fortunate enough to be on a movie for Interscope. And the people at Interscope asked if I wanted to come and be a producer. They had a theory that if you could tell a story in any of the fields of movie or television making, you could pretty much be a producer if you knew how to do that. So I spent 10 years at Interscope, and then I went to Imagine Entertainment, and I was president of that company for the last 8 years, and I was there for 14 years. And then, like I said, recently started Seth's company. So Seth is most people know him from Family Guy and American Dad and Ted. And what we have been doing in the last couple of years is created a company to expand to do all genres, still doing some animation, but movies, television, and it's been like a very well-funded startup. It's been really fun, and it's a good challenge, and it was a good time to do something in the streaming world. I had done movies primarily for the last 25 years, and so being able to move into doing all kinds of content was the broader goal when I left Imagine. So that's me.
Great, thank you. Arpita? We have Arpita, who's the writer on that last clip that we saw, and maybe we can have her join on camera.
I don't know why my camera refuses to turn on. I'm trying again. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going
That's
on.
okay. Maybe Rayanne can help us. There you go.
Oh, there it is. Sorry
There
about
she
that.
is.
Yeah. Yeah, so hi, my name is Arpita Kumar. At the moment, I am I'm a senior writer, content strategist for the Google Assistant, which is Google's AI. So it's like every time you interact with that disembodied voice for the Google Home or the Pixel, and ask it something that's like character based, like what do you look like, or do you sing, and the tongue-in-cheek response that you get is something that I've crafted. So it's basically kind of trying to figure out how to humanize tech for AI that is sort of going to take over. And before that, yeah, I was in a writer's room for Issa Rae, and was also making like indie films. And after Hampshire, sorry, I'm going like all over the place. Yeah, but I graduated in 2006 from Hampshire, and I wanted to do more writing. So I went to the University of Iowa, and then I was like, no, I want to make films. So I went to Cal Arts, and that's when I moved to LA and discovered this amazing community of filmmakers, and did a bit of like experimental and narrative work, and just wrote a lot of stuff, and kind of attracted, some of my scripts attracted attention, and kind of like led to sort of ended up being in tech somehow, from film to tech. Yeah.
I love your road, your journey, and especially what you're doing right now, and thinking about what Erica said about wanting to be able to work or write in all different mediums, because I think, you see a lot of crossover, and maybe transdisciplinary is the word that we should be using. One thing I wanted to ask you all, and I know that I found this in my own work and career. I worked at ILM, at Lucasfilm, producing and working in commercials, but it's possible for me that the training in writing and the rigor that we develop at Hampshire is something that might be I found one of my most useful skills. And I wanted to ask each of you what you worked on, what, and studied at Hampshire, and how that may or may not have informed what you are doing now. So any one of you could jump in and chime in on that.
I'll go. I was a anthropology major, but found film sort of late in my Hampshire career. And Joan Braderman's first year at Hampshire was yeah, she was amazing, is amazing. I wanted to make a film for my Div 3. And I think because she was brand new, and I think because I was pretty clear that I wasn't going to go away, she said yes. Because it was pretty unusual, not having been in the film department at all in the last years of Hampshire, to do that as my Div 3. But that was sort of the beginning, and it was Joan, Abe Rivette, and Jerry Liebling who were on my Div 3 committee. And it became, for me, it was very interesting because I really wanted to do documentaries. So when I left Hampshire, having made a short movie, I felt like editorial and being in the editing room was where I really understood how to actually put something together. And so for me, the writing process was really in the editing. And so when I came back home, because I was from LA, when I came back to Los Angeles, I was lucky enough at the time to get a job as a, apprentice film editor. And I thought I'd go back to documentaries, but I sort of got scooped up into the world of features at the time. And it was, a really good time, because there were it was unlike what it is today. Movies were king. Everybody went to movies every weekend. And so it was a really exciting and fun time to be learning. My first feature as an assistant editor was Hairspray, the original John Waters Hairspray. So I then spent several years with John Waters working on his movies, which was insane and wonderful. But so that's how I started, through Hampshire's film department.
It's interesting that Joan gave you a shot, even though, but I know I worked with Joan as well, and I adore Joni. And I think that I can imagine, it was just a few years after you, but I can imagine that she was willing to give you a shot, because she wants any woman who wants to tell their story and's got a story to tell. You can get over the technical aspects of the filmmaking if you can have a really good narrative and story to be telling. So that's really interesting.
It was great. She was great.
Yeah, Joan and Abraham Rivet were on my committee as well.
Oh, cool.
So Arpita or Sarah, do you have any comments on, where you came from writing at Hampshire and how that may have informed your work?
Arpita, do you want me to go next? Is it sort of the order of when we were at Hampshire? Would that be just in terms of like staff
Yes,
or
please
whatever?
do.
Okay. So I joked that when I was a kid, I always wanted to do whatever the coolest adult in my life was doing. So I entered Hampshire College thinking I was gonna be an English teacher, because I really liked my senior year English teacher. And then I quickly realized I liked not so much the education classes and a lot more the writing and the literature classes. And then there was a kind of movement at the time, both at Hampshire and there was a little bit at Amherst, of this kind of, Ellie Duncan taught a class called Page to Stage. And so it was a lot about literative performance. And like that was I enjoyed that. And then that got me thinking about theater and seeing your words out loud. And so for my Div 3, I wrote a play. And for someone else's Div 3, they directed it, and it was a whole thing. And so it was just in the little black box theater at Hampshire, but it was magical for me to hear my words out loud, because everything else had been sort of pen on paper and writers' workshops or professors' notes. And so this was like 3-dimensional, and I got to invite people and I got to hear it. And if it was funny, they laughed. And if it was sad, they sighed. And if it wasn't funny, they didn't laugh. And so it was a really good sort of live feedback for me that I really enjoyed. So I graduated Hampshire knowing I wanted to do more writing out loud, whatever that meant. And so I sort of debated whether or not to try to go to New York and be a playwright and maybe go to a playwriting grad program, or move to LA and try to be a TV writer. And I decided that it was easier to be poor in a warm climate. So I came to California.
I love it.
Are we all in California right now? Because I still am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. For me, it's kind of more. I moved to Hampshire from like a really small town in India that was like super conservative, and but over there, I belonged to like the mainstream. I was like the majority. I was Hindu. I was Hindi speaking. I was North Indian, and the world was like catered around me. And so like moving to Hampshire was kind of like such a change of perspective and being, because suddenly like that was like the first time I encountered this bewildering term, woman of color. And I was like, wait, what? Why are there like white women call women are white? What's happening? I don't understand. And then it was like years later, like this experience was kind of validated in the Chimananda Ngozi Adichie's book, Americana. Her protagonist also has that experience. And it's, I kind of like started getting drawn to this like experience of women who in their home countries like had form of like privilege and power, and then you move to the US and suddenly you are like a minority, and like you like don't have that voice, or you kind of like sort of are at the margins, and sort of like that I became hungry for those narratives and those characters, and like what were these stories, and what was this like space, this in-between space, and like and I mean, I got exposed to it because I moved to Hampshire, but then Hampshire also equipped me to talk about it. Like it was Lee Sanders, she was my advisor, taught me the term liminal, which is what this whole experience is about. And then of course, Joan Brademan, who like loved being in her class, because I am like a pretty gutsy woman myself, but like I was just like blown by her, like sort of like, it was like, call it out, like that's BS, and like that gaze is like unacceptable, and like what's this like boys club of filmmaking? And I was like, who is this, a woman? Yes. So I mean, it was kind of it was like empowering, and also being like kind of exposed to just like a world that I'd never been in, that kind of like it gave me a voice, and it kind of gave me point of view that I otherwise would never have. And it's kind of like fed the way I write and the way this kind of cinema I make. And even sort of like right now in tech, like I'm kind of always like building a character that can be in between multiple like locales, multiple like states of being, multiple mediums, like, so I mean, it's just, I guess it's like sort of just like actually physically moving myself from like a space where I was a majority to one where like I wasn't, and then like just being exposed to the discourse about around it at Hampshire, that's kind of like actually made me sort of like the person that I am, that allows me to like kind of work in different worlds.
It's really, great to hear how you kind of carry that from India to Hampshire, and then you're in a different environment completely. And I was too when I went to Hampshire. It was different than where I had grown up, and the kinds of things that we were talking about, the discourse that we were engaged with. It was the first time that I was talking about these types of things, and then going out into the work world as well. And I wanted to ask you all how you felt about the sort of the Hampshire values, and how you have brought that into your work. I know that when everyone gets their first job in whatever, right, when they graduate, whether it is somewhere in the film industry, entry level as a editor or a writer or as a PA, which is what I was, how you carry who you are and the things that you've been learning and those skills, and how does that contrast with your experience in the practical use of that in, mainstream?
It's a really good question, because I think that at least for me, I felt empowered to be, to find my own path, but to also decide that I wasn't going to be what everybody else thought I should be. Mm-hmm. And that started pretty young for me. Even before I was at Hampshire, I think that there were expectations for the boys in the family versus the girls in the family, even though I came from a pretty liberal California family. There was just this expectation. You go to college, you get married, you have children, you work, whatever. Maybe you become a lawyer, but maybe. That's the sort of maybe, especially from the Jewish family that I came from. But I think that it also gave me, when I was given the opportunity to come and be a producer at Interscope with the executives that I had been working with as an editor on the movie. It was called The Gun in Betty Lou's Handbag. The producers were all men. They were interested in my spirit. I could tell that was part of it, but I don't think that they thought that it was, I think that they thought it would be an interesting experiment. I'm not sure how they saw the long term. And so, some people call it lucky, some people call it hard work, but I think that there's a point at which you make a decision. And I think Hampshire allowed me to find those moments, those pivot points, to make those decisions, to go from, being an anthropology major to making a movie, from making, a movie as an editor to wanting to be a producer, wanting to be a great producer, not knowing how to do it, just doing it. And so I think that the doing it part is what Hampshire really brought to me personally. I didn't have to ask anybody's permission. Nobody was telling me that. And so I think that was an empowering takeaway. And certainly for my group of friends from Hampshire, who I'm still very close with. In fact, I met my husband my last semester at Hampshire. And so, I mean, we've been together for a long time. I'm not going to say how long, but, it created that emboldened kind of powerful dynamic where you're willing to take a chance. You're willing to step off and move into the unknown with questions and books and the ideas in your head, and make it work for you because you are good enough. And I think that that's part of it.
I was going to ask Sarah to jump in.
Sure. I think for me, it's actually almost like an obvious parallel in the sense that you have these 20-person seminars at Hampshire, and a writer's room is anywhere between 5 and 12 people sitting in a room around a big table trying to solve something. So it has incredible parallel to writer's room, and if had I only gone to a college that had 300 people in a lecture hall, I may have been a whole lot less conversant and comfortable with that as a way of learning and doing and being. And I think all shows in general, but especially I would say season 1 shows where, you have some characters and some ideas and some situations, and then you have to make 10, 13, 22, 24 episodes out of it. That's a very Hampshire type experiment, right? That's like, here's a bucket of parts, now make a car. Like I think first season shows have that feeling a little bit because there's a lot that's there, but not all of it. And you can't see so far into the distance to know everything. And so there's a lot of group think that gets it over the finish line. And I think all of that is very, very Hampshire.
Was the environment in those writer groups, did you find yourself feeling like, I don't know what the gender balance was, or if it was, what kinds of people were in those rooms with you? How did you feel? Because I always feel like when I go on my first job, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, right? And so, you walk in the room and you just got to be ready to have the, guts to do whatever. But I'm just wondering what those rooms looked like for you.
So it's changed over time significantly. Like when I first, it also depends the genre of show, right? So CSI was my first job. That's more of sort of a muscular show that often tends to get more male writers. And there weren't the sort of, we must have more women in the room rules then. So there were 2 women who were sort of executive producers on that show, but they were often out putting out fires and dealing with things. And so it was mostly me and 3 to 5 men. And I was the assistant. So at first I was told don't, not by them, but by people who, knew better, were like, don't talk. And I was like, okay, I will not talk. And I just typed and took notes and typed and took notes. And 2 weeks in, because you have to understand too, CSI is now ubiquitous and there's many, many spinoffs. But at the time, there were cop shows and there were law shows, but this was like science cops. And it wasn't, it wasn't the sort of well, you just put them in an interrogation room and you give them the what for. That wasn't what we were doing. It was well, could they find a fiber from the car? Would you be able to know it was a Ford if from the, I don't know, we got to call the researcher, and no one quite knew what the rules were. So we were making it up. And so it 2 weeks in, the 3 men got stuck. and I was like, what if we made it a wine bottle? And I just sort of out of the side of my mouth, said something that they liked. And they were like, you talk more. And I was like, okay, I will talk more. And from then on, it was it opened the floodgates, and I was really a welcome participant, and there weren't that many of us. And it was I always say I was pretty well raised in the business. I've seen a lot of bad things and I've experienced some bad things, but overall, even when I've been in rooms with majority men, it's been a pretty good experience, and they've not been super shitty. And, it's been pretty good. And now, I would say the majority of the rooms I'm in are women. The trinket staff had 1 white man, and we were our token white man. And so, it really has shifted really differently, because I think it became important, and also what you're seeing represented on screen is really different, right? So it used to be, you could use the excuse of well, it's about white cops, and that's not true anymore. It's about lots of other things. So it's good to have lots of other representation to kind of, in Trinkets, we tried to make sure that we matched as closely as possible to what we had on screen. So for instance, one of the characters is a lesbian. And so, we wanted to make sure that we were able to bring that experience in. And one character, so we tried to follow enough along identity politic lines that it felt like you could build a story with that group and not feel like you were faking it.
Great. Arpita?
Oh my God, you guys are such super achievers. I'm just so I agree with Erica in that the fact that Hampshire at the very onset teaches you that you take charge of your education, your growth, your upward trajectory or downward trajectory, and that you don't need permission from anyone. That was kind of because I've been in a lot of places like on sets and in writer's room and in like tech engineering meetings where I'm clueless. I'm like, oh, I have no idea. And then like you're paralyzed by your imposter syndrome too. You're like, am I supposed to be here? And I mean, I guess like the only thing, the big thing that helps me overcome it is the fact that like I've done this before, where I've like just like kind of been building the plane while I've been flying it, and like so many other situations before this. And so like that kind of has been empowering for me to like go ahead. Like, I mean, like I never at Hampshire, like all my film work was like experimental in a way. And so then like when I was thrown into like directing actors and like didn't know how to give like actionable directions, was like, look sad. And they're just like, what? You know, so it's just like, I mean, it's like you're failing miserably, but you're like, you know, you're going to learn and there's going to be growth. So I guess like that is something that like I learned at, like, it was like drilled into me at Hampshire. That's kind of like really kind of helped me like not be afraid of failure, not be afraid to know, or like I'd be like, oh, I don't have any practical experience of this, or I like have no idea what this ML engineer is saying to me right now, but I'm just gonna like wing it. So yeah, I guess, I mean, they said it all. I mean, they've had like they've had like way more than I have had like experience in this.
No, I liked being able to chalk up everything as a learning experience. I guess part of the journey, because that's what it is. I mean, people go through life like making all kinds of mistakes, or you know, and you do better and you improve on it, and you have the guts to do it. And I think that's really, you know, how people charge forth. I was interested in actually one of the students. We have some questions that are from that Brunner pulled together from the students. I wanted to make sure we have a chance because we're blowing through our time here. One of the questions someone asked was, what knowledge most unexpectedly proved useful in your career? And I think that maybe that chalking everything up to a learning experience, but you know, if any of you have thoughts on, you know, something that maybe was unexpected in your background that you pulled into your work life that advanced you.
I mean, for like in the present role that I am, like having gone to Hampshire and like having like that built-in sense of social responsibility is kind of like been a driving force, where like when I joined Google 4 years ago, one of my first projects was to build a character for an AI for people who had literacy challenges that couldn't read and write in different parts of the world. And so accessing the internet, the voice was the only gateway, the only source for information. Then how do you build a character for someone who doesn't read and write? How do you advocate for someone who can't read and write? And like how, you know, it's like you don't other the user in that way, and you make the character respectful. You make the character in a way that, you know, for that user, it feels like this person gets me. And like now, you know, it was like really fascinating to like build that character, have the AI launch, and see people in India, rural women in India and Indonesia interact with it. And like it was really rewarding for them, for me to be like, oh, this person is just able to figure out where they can go vote, or like how to like run this new stove or something by just talking to a character you build. So that was like something that like was really rewarding. And now like my job is more US centric, and I constantly like advocate for building an AI that is for everyone.
I was going to ask, why isn't every voice like that? I mean, if that AI voice was designed, and those responses, right? Everything, the way that everything is framed is for that. How were they receptive to employing that with other?
Yeah, I mean, that's the constant sort of like, that's the voice you have to be in like this space now, you know, to advocate for every user, not just the majority users or the mainstream user. It's like, oh, like, you know, let's build this so that it's AI is accessible to everyone in the US, around the world, not just like the limited, like the first tech people, like the first adapters and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess like just being like social, like very aware of what's your responsibility in the world, like that's something that like Hampshire kind of really drilled in me too.
Sarah had mentioned, you know, that they were writing and bringing on writing teams, you know, in order to have authentic voices and things like that. I wanted to ask you, Erica, you know, in your experience and, you know, many years of work in the industry, how you were, you know, bringing in those values and thinking about that in the work that you were producing.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that being in the entertainment business teaches you is that you have to have something to bring to it. It's not, you really have to have a point of view. You have to know who you are. You have to have the ability to like and dislike things and know why you do. I think that, having a kind of understanding, a psychology of people, because talking and especially as a producer, or running a company, part of it is the interaction with people. On a movie or television, you can't do it alone. It's with, a big group of people, and you have to find your way through that. And you have to find a way to listen really well. I used to give talks a lot to, I still do, but not as much anymore. To talk about listening, because there are people who really don't have that skill. And in the movie business, in the TV business, in the tech business, anytime when you're in that sort of interactive relationship with people, I don't know about doctors in the same way, but there's a part of you that really has to be able to turn that on and hear people. So I think, look, the world has changed so much in the last 5 years, 10 years, but last year and a half, 2 years has been extraordinary change for all of us. And authenticity matters more than ever. And I think, to what Sarah was saying, the pendulum will swing back, I think, to the middle, where, if I were a white female writer, maybe I'd get an opportunity to write a show about a man. But right now, a woman has to write a show about a woman. A Black writer needs to, I think that we've created the best situation to find an equilibrium, because for the first time, it matters in a huge way that you have something that is authentic to bring to, whether it's the tech table or the writer's room, or, to come upon a movie or a book that I want to create a television show into. Your connection matters, and how you then decide to elaborate on that connection and bring in other people who also have connections matters. And it didn't matter in the same way before. So I think that's kind of a stunning, beautiful thing that's happened over the last, several years, but certainly since, Me Too and Black Lives Matter, and just really seeing how we've shifted.
It's interesting you were mentioning like listening as this really important skill, and to continue to cultivate that and remind ourselves and to enter every space that way, right? And engage people at all levels in that way. Are there other skills that you all have felt have been just like indispensable, or like if you were to, we look at the educations that we have at Hampshire and the skills that we cultivate there, how are there any secret gems or things that you think of that are just always important to keep in mind, whether they're Hampshire things, social responsibility, any of these things that you think have come to bear, often in the career when you're facing big challenges?
One of the things I would just mention is the idea of kind of understanding that there are a lot of people there are a lot of different personalities, right? And the personality types do matter. And how you deal with that ultimately does change the way a dynamic can ultimately sort of be the outcome, the good outcome, or maybe the not so good outcome. And we've probably all had those, right? But it's also finding things that you like to do. I never really got this lesson until I was at Hampshire, that the idea of work was this thing that was over here that we all had to do to make money. But isn't it nice to be able to do something that actually makes you happy and that you're good at? So if you're good at reading, or you're good at talking, or you're good at roller skating, or those things matter because they're the things that we ultimately put, doesn't have to just be the hobby, right? So for me, it was like, I was always a huge reader, like just one of those, like I just could sit in my room for hours. I loved books. I loved science fiction. And it became sort of a superpower when I started to understand what my world was going to look like as a producer, because I had the knowledge of, having read so much more than most of my colleagues as a kid. And I think that that's also something, and I still love it. I mean, it's still a huge part of my everyday. I have homework of 6 or 7 scripts and a few books over the week. So it's not, but it's, for some people, it can be hard. And I think you have to move in a direction that makes you feel like it's something you're good at.
I have 2 things, and Erica, you took both of them, but I'll do my quippy little, as I was standing here going, what would I do? And one was, the more you read, the smarter you are. We live in a culture where people don't read anymore, they scroll. So any book you read is an advantage over most people, and any article, so really reading is I find a huge deal, just in terms of bringing a breadth of knowledge to a situation. And the other thing I would say, which is also similar to what you were saying earlier, is that people are people in any environment, right? So the producers are just a bunch of people, and the studio is just people. Like, I think sometimes they can seem like a behemoth or some kind of wall that you can't, but walls are made of people. Like, these institutions are, it's like Congress. It's like, no, that's people, right? So I think that that's something that I always try to remember if I'm nervous or I feel like I can't, like there's going to be a sticking point in the process that I'm not going to be able to get through, or it's going to be too big or to this or to that. I'm like, it's a person. It's going to be a person or a few people. That's it. At the end, like they're not going to like put the studio gate in front of you and be like, pitch to that, like that isn't how it goes. There's a person. So people are people, and the more you read, the smarter you are.
Yep. I love that. Arpita, and you're working in technology, and I'm in the Silicon Valley. I'm not sure if you're located here, or you're in any one of the other Google offices in the world, but
I'm in the Bay Area.
You are. And it's just thinking about how tech structure is different, and this is a really broad generalization, but than any other kind of company, or certainly studios, right? And the big film companies and media agencies. And just wondering, well, Google's is a media agency of a different type. How is your feeling about these rooms that you're in, and the environment that you're working in, with respect to what Sarah and Erica were just saying?
I mean, it's remarkable what they said. It makes sense about the people being people. Like, that is totally like true for, tech world too. Like, it's just like we have more type A personalities, but it's definitely makes sense. And
can we just note that she said that tech has more type A personalities than film?
Sorry. But it's the truth. It's just like we're all just, I don't know. The way that our team is like it's called the personality team. The way it's structured is just like, it is like create people who have a more creative background, but we interface with engineering, and like we interface with data analysts and all. So it's kind of like trying to also navigate like disciplines that I otherwise never thought I would ever in my entire life, that I would be staring at like a block of code in front of me and trying to like figure that out. So, but again, it goes back to just not being afraid to ask questions and not being afraid to be curious about it too. Like, I did suffer from a lot of imposter syndrome once I got there, and I was like, am I supposed to be here? I'm going to break Google. What's going to happen? But I guess like just being curious about it, asking questions, and not being afraid to look stupid at times.
No, I like that, actually, that framing of curiosity, and like also the more you read, the smarter you are, which is true. But I also think when you walk into rooms and you're in these meetings and you're coming up in the work world, that that demonstrating curiosity is also intelligence. Like curiosity is intelligence, right? And so showing that you are interested and you're asking questions and asking the right kinds of questions, and asking them respectfully, you got to have some, guts to come into rooms, but you also have to be humble in different ways and listen, right? And how you're going to accept knowledge from experts who are, or other people, they may or may not be experts, who have opinions and thoughts on things, so that you can learn, right? And then learn to generate your own path and move through. One thing and anyone can jump in at any time, but I've been just fascinated thinking about, Arpita, your work in AI, and that you're actually creating, I don't know how to, I'm going to fumble through saying this, but like you're creating stories from the opposite side, right? Like you see, Erica and Sarah and people in the film industry, writers, like generating work this way, and then you're generating answers, but that creates a whole other world and a whole other narrative. And it's just fascinating to me. It's like upside down to me to think of it.
To be honest, it isn't. I borrow from script writing, like all the basic, like just like what are the components of a character, like what are the character's needs and wants. Like I build my characters off of everything I learned in film school, I learned in like filmmaking. It's like all those, like, your character has beats too. And it's just like, it's like, what reaction you want from the audience is like, oh, what reaction do I want from my user, or what will my user say next if I say this? And it's like just writing a script in a certain way too. So it's like, I definitely see like filmmaking and script writers and writers and people who create characters like finding a home in tech very soon, because I just feel like, and the way where we are right now, I shared this with Bruno earlier, it's like we're in like the Lumiere phase of filmmaking, where we had those 50-second 50-second like film roll, and it was just like people walking out of a factory, and that's what's it. So it's so rudimentary right now in terms of character, but it's just going to explode. But it all like the root is in like how we build characters, how we write a script, like the 3-arc structure. Like I go to that stuff like on the regular, and it's like informs so much of what I'm doing, so it's not very removed from that. It's just like sometimes when you do something that's like, it's like, how do you communicate that to the tech side of the world that you're interfacing with every day as well? But other than that, like
sorry, are you saying AI is just people too?
Just people too, baby.
Yeah, I mean, AI is trying to make you believe that it's people, yeah. And if I'm doing my job, then you believe it.
It's a really interesting world that you're in, because it's the growth part. It's the other boom that we're watching, right? What's happening, privacy, all that stuff. But I do think it's fascinating to see how you're coming into it, and the whole idea of creating an AI that has a world viewpoint, I think is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's also really fascinating to watch like Black Mirror or like Westworld, and you're just like, huh? Like draw ideas from like also like writing that's out there, like making the real world real, but like in a positive, googly way. Not
right.
Well, I think that AI as an industry, is a huge industry, but it's so like male white tech dominated. And when I look at it or think about it, and I'm not in the industry at all, but I would just, to me, it seems like it's so nascent in its development, like with respect to diversity and to multiple voice and even to purpose, right? Like they're always trying to like develop the female assistant. I'm like, come on, right. So I won't even continue down that road, but you see what I mean? Like I think that you're at the like epicenter of all of this right now, and to be able to push the needle at all in these different directions, and the things that you're working on are really, really fascinating. Do you ladies have any questions for each other or thoughts? There are some other questions in the chat, and I just want to make sure we give everyone a chance to express themselves here. And one of the other questions that was up was, have you ever felt comfortable saying, when did you feel comfortable saying no to a job? And maybe that's sort of like where people are in their careers, but maybe just thinking about challenges or being in a different type of position than the one that you had when you entered, right? So we've been talking a lot about your early parts of your careers and how you've made your path through, but you know, as you've gotten more senior in what you're doing, or even in any kind of work situation, have you found yourselves saying no to jobs and declining things or changing your trajectories?
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, I also think, you know, you say no to things that come your way because you actually have a point of view based on what you've learned, right? So there is a certain knowledge that comes from having done something before. But I also think, you know, we talk about this a lot in my staff meetings, that you have to feel like you can say no, that you can say, you know what, this one's not for us. This idea is a great idea. It's a great project. It's a great book. It's a great article. It's a great director, whatever it is. But you know what, it's not right for this. And that's hard. Because you end up falling for things that you don't quite know. You don't want to say no, you want to say yes, but you're not sure how to make that happen. So I think finding that place to be able to say no is a big deal. It was for me, at least.
How often is that like the decision between like art and creativity and business, you think?
I think it's often sanity related. I seriously, like, I think that I've either said no to things or I have had to gracefully exit situations for sanity issues. Like the way that they operated creatively was like unsustainable for me, or the itch wasn't worth the scratch. Like you'd look at the situation and be like, I can see what that's going to be. And that's not what I want right now. You know, like so I think for me, it's usually about personality, environment, like just like what's going to feel like a good creative space and what's not.
The people.
Yeah. I mean, I like the life is too short, you know, comments as well, more in that, you know, when you've done a lot of the groundwork and you've paid your dues, you know, and you get to a place which isn't that far down the road really, but to make sure that every day, you know, and all the work that you're doing and what you're giving up to be there, or what it is that you're creating that you love to do continues to be what you love to do. And like for me, I know that if we have clients that we just like talk to the hand, man, you know, like we have gotten to the place where I would rather not be working, right, than be working with these people because they're just toxic in whatever way that it may be. Or like we like to say, it's not the right fit. I will say that to the end of the day, end of time, you know, like it's not the right fit. You just keep using that as the reason. So you're not burning any bridges necessarily, but man, sometimes it's just, can't even go there, you know? Yeah. We are reaching the end of our time. And so I wanted to thank everybody and invite us all. We're all going to be moving into a sort of a more casual chat potentially. So, and any of us that can stay and hang on and say hello. I did peek at the attendee list when we first logged in, and I think our very own Abrivette may be in there, and some other folks that we would love to say hi to or be able to talk to. So Karen, I want to turn it back over to you and thank all of our friends here for a really wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Elle, and thanks Arpita and Sarah and Erica. This was awesome. I especially like that part about Hampshire being a first season show. That's so true. I can't wait to see what the second season is. Who knows what's next? And the little view into the future and how you're all going to be working in AI soon. I think that's awesome. So many good little messages and tidbits tonight.